Okay, looks like we should go ahead and get started. Well, again, this is John Danforth with NOAA AMS. Thank you all for taking time out this morning to join us and learn more about analytic strategies. We're very excited to be teaming up with Association Analytics this morning on this topic. I know it's of great interest to all of you. I've noticed in our community growing number of posts on this topic, so the timing couldn't have been better. Wish I could claim credit for that, but that goes to the folks at Association Analytics for pushing me to keep on this. So we're very happy to be partnering with them on this presentation. And Julie Shula will be going through all of this, and I'll let her do a self-introduction. But again, we're very glad you're with us. And if you have any particular questions, if they branch into the NOAA side of things, I'll be on the entire webinar to chime in as questions come in. And of course, we can schedule follow-up discussions and emails. I'm available to all of you for follow-up questions on how you could get started with this using NOAA. So with that, let me kick it over to Julie, and thanks again.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. So we're here today to talk about how to create an analytic strategy and roadmap. Please feel free to jump in and ask any questions as it relates to an analytic strategy roadmap or just data analytics questions in general. We will branch off and talk a little bit about analytics and visualizations as well as the strategy and roadmap piece. Okay. Again, I'm Julie Shula, CEO of Association Analytics. A little bit about us very quickly. We're located in Arlington, Virginia. We focus primarily solely in the association and nonprofit space. We have 100% client retention. We partner across the association space. We have integrations out of the box. And then we also have a SaaS solution that brings together your data sources into visualizations and dashboards so you can make decisions in real time. We also have a community, ACE, our acumen community, and then a Power BI user group, special interest group around associations and nonprofits. So with that, we'll get started. 85% of organizations struggle because their data is captured and stored in disparate, disconnected systems. This is common when we're talking to folks, and I wish I could see you all raise your hands. If I were to ask if this relates to you, we usually get the majority of the people in the room that it does. So your data universe might look something like this. Of course, you have the NOAA AMS. You might have some other systems. You might have an LMS, an event system, perhaps a community, finance, and really a bunch of different source systems where a lot of times you're looking to bring this data together to make decisions. When you start to think about doing this, you want to start to think about some sort of system that's optimized for analysis. Everybody's really trying to get to a 360 view of your members and drive member engagement. And there are different levels of analytics. And so when you're starting and you're thinking about it, you might think about dashboards and visualizations. And then you might get to something that's more self-service. So now that you see this, how can I go in and start to do data exploration? Then on here, you see predictive analytics. So this is really getting to how can I predict what's going to happen? An example of this might be who's likely to renew or who's likely to attend. And so as you think about your analytics journey and where you're entering it, think about these different levels of analytics. So these are the things that usually sound familiar, and we're hearing a lot when we're talking to associations. So it takes days, certainly hours, to prepare manual reports, kind of an incomplete understanding of member preferences and interests, and often siloed in departments. So, membership may have a certain view, events may have a certain view, but there's really no 360 view of membership. You can't get answers to questions quickly. Oftentimes, too, you're running reports and you might be getting different answers to the same questions, wondering which programs to sunset, where should you spend your time? A lot of us are resource strapped, so figuring out, which programs really are profitable and focusing our time on those. looking for new sources of revenue. Of course, people are often looking for non-news revenue. Where do we expand? How much time do we spend on those? And then want to identify new target audiences. So when you're thinking about an analytics strategy, you don't want to just focus on your membership. You also want to focus on your non-members and who else out there is a potential member or customer for your association. So these are the different components of a data and analytics journey. So in the middle, you see a central repository. And you'll hear me refer to this throughout. A central repository, this should be something that's built for analytics and is an analytical tool. Around that, you have different components. So some of these words you may have heard before. I'll talk through what a couple of them are, and then we'll dive into actually putting together an analytics strategy and roadmap. So data governance. This is something that's becoming more and more prevalent in the association space. A great example of this is a data dictionary. So when you think about membership or a member or retention rate or a grace period, is everybody in your association defining those terms the same way? And this is a core component of data governance, is having a data governance committee and also a data dictionary. So you are all speaking the same language. This is important for many reasons, but it's important in analytics because that way when you're reading a report or looking at a visualization, you're interpreting it the same way, regardless of where you sit in the association. Predictive analytics we touched on. This is where everybody's really trying to get, is predicting exactly what's going to happen, where should I focus my time. Analytics strategy roadmap, we're going to work through that in more detail today, and also touch on KPIs. That's often a core component of an analytics strategy and roadmap. So begin with the end in mind. So we're going to start by looking at a couple of visualizations on what the end goal might be of an analytics strategy roadmap. So you might be looking to get to something like this, and this is an engagement overview. And so this is really showing you a 360 view of your membership. So here you have the point distribution. This could be made up many different ways depending on how your membership's interacting with your association. But here you can clearly see the pieces that make up the member score. And over on the left-hand side, there are a couple of KPIs, the average score and then the highest score. Also looking at the top 5 job titles. This is all just dummy data to get you really inspired in thinking about what the end goal might look like when you're doing an analytic strategy and roadmap. Your top customers. Then at the top, you see slicers. So when you're thinking about building an analytic strategy, you want to think about building everything down to the lowest level of granularity and making everything dynamic. So you should be able to kind of click and slice and dice to quickly get the answers that you need at any given time with real-time data. So something interesting too to always think about and look at, and I talked about this a couple minutes ago, are your non-members. So, you know, here at the top you have slicers, you have a non-member slicer. So it's often interesting to see who are our highly engaged non-members and what are they doing with us at the association. So here you break it down a little bit further into cohorts. And so you can see exactly what peer-to-peers are doing in any given time. And then at the bottom here, an actual detailed report for an individual member. And so here you can see exactly their score. They're ranked number 1. So this is a very, very highly engaged member. And then exactly what did they do with your association? And why this could be important is you can look at what your highly engaged members are doing and then put together campaigns to drive other members to do those same things. Because at the end of the day, of course, we're all looking to drive engagement with our members. Okay, so now you saw kind of what the end state might look like and where you're really looking to go. So let's dive into the analytic strategy and roadmap. So let's start very simply with what is analytics. Analytics is data-guided decision making that leads to action. So that's something that you want to keep in mind all throughout your analytics journey is you want to think about what leads to action. because a lot of things can look cool, or you might be curious about an answer, but unless it leads to an action, a decision that you're going to make that's going to change the way that you're doing business, drive your mission, then maybe you shouldn't focus there, right? And you really want to continue to keep that in mind. So one of the first things that you look at is, where do you want to go? So these are the goals of an analytics strategy and roadmap. So you want to educate, that's a big one that's often missed. This could be a cultural shift and a change for a lot of associations. You want to make sure education and communication plans are built out. You want to educate executives and key staff about the benefits and outcomes of analytics. Align analytics objectives with organizational strategic plans. So you really want to look at your strategy and your strategic plans and what your KPIs are, and then take an inventory. So when we're talking about data governance, a component of that is actually a data inventory. And where's your data coming from? What sources of data do you have? And making sure those are all mapped out so you can make sure you have the data to answer the questions that you need to answer. So assess and document the current state and desired future states. And we're going to walk through kind of a mini roadmap on how you go about these things, but these are the goals of the roadmap. Clarify the value of analytics and cost of the current situation. And part of that cost could simply be the cost of the time it takes current staff to put together reports. So, you know, of course, you're looking at ways to drive revenue, find new target audiences, all of those to really drive ROI. But you also need to think about the operational costs and the cost of the current situation. So identify achievable desired outcomes. So start with small wins like anything else. And that can also help drive some of the adoption when you're putting an analytics journey or analytics roadmap into implementation. Prioritize recommendations based on impact and complexity. And there might be some low-hanging fruit that you want to go ahead and take advantage of first, and then act on what you learn. So some other outcomes that you might be looking for, really in any analytics journey, better decisions faster. So think about today, in all of our jobs, we're expected to make decisions faster. And that can be difficult if we don't have the data that we need to make those decisions, or it's not in a format that's easily consumable. So if you're looking at a spreadsheet and you're asking me to look at and find a trend, that could be very difficult, right? Unless you have some sort of chart or graph, you're not going to be able to easily grasp that information or see that trend on a spreadsheet. Everybody's looking to get to trusted, accurate, consistent, integrated data. And so everybody's looking for this one source of truth. Where do I go to get a consistent answer to the questions I have? Is my data optimized for analysis, not storage? Do I have interactive visualizations that really replace some of those static reports and spreadsheets? Of course, an enhanced member and customer experience. So that's something we're striving for in everything that we do, and so analytics shouldn't be any different from that. So a more complete view of customers, so like you saw earlier on the engagement dashboard, really looking at a 360 view of membership. And I'll touch on something else here too. When we're thinking about data and analytics, you don't want to just be thinking about the transactional data and the structured data. You really need to take into account the unstructured and the behavioral data too. So an example of that might be community and community data. That's not something we always think about looking at for analysis, but it can really tell us a lot about our membership, right? So if you consume all of that data in and start to look at things like trending topics by different member types, you're able to make some decisions really quickly based off of that. And we'll touch again on that a little bit later in the presentation. And ultimately looking for improved member engagement. Improved efficiency, so again, talking about reducing manual effort and how long it really takes to manipulate data for reporting, make changes and ask new questions in real time, reduce errors and inconsistency. So a lot of times you have, and I'm not sure if this happens at your associations, but certainly a lot of the ones that we talk to and visit, we have multiple different departments producing the same reports or the same types of reports over and over again, whether that be department by department or month by month, or everybody really dropping everything for a long period of time to put together the board reports, and really trying to get current numbers on demand. Increasing revenue, that's certainly a goal that you're trying to get to when you're putting together any sort of analytics roadmap. So increase conversions through segmentation and targeted marketing. This is something you can certainly do through data visualizations and having that 360 view, driving meeting attendance, and then data-guided product decisions. So looking at where you are now, so any sort of roadmap, this is how you're going to put it together. You're going to look at where you are now, where you want to be in the future, and what is that gap analysis that's going to allow you to get there. So this is a study or a survey that we did at an ASAE conference. And as you can see there, you can think about whether this relates to your association. There are some things that people certainly highly agreed with and highly disagreed with. So if you look over on the left-hand side, our data is available in a centralized location for easy reporting and analysis. Everybody really strongly disagreed with this. So 72% of people disagreed with having everything in a centralized location. And this really goes along with where we started in the quote at the beginning, that 85% of organizations had data spread throughout their organization. And then if you look over on the left-hand side, we use visualization tools to understand our data to quickly make decisions. Not a lot of people had that yet. They would strongly disagree. However, it's interesting when you look at data analytics has the support of the CEO and board, it's highly agreed. And so it seems like everybody's really there and we're at a tipping point. So everybody understands that data and analytics is really important. Everybody sees how they use it in their current roles, but yet we're not there where we're fully implementing something that supports that and allows people in their day-to-day jobs to get access to data and information in a way that they can use it to make decisions. So that's really the takeaway of that report. So then jumping to exactly the focus areas of an analytic strategy and roadmap. And so when you're breaking it down and you want to look at where you are today, you want to look at where you are today with these 4 focus areas. So people, process, technology, and data. And so you want to get a current state analysis of each one of these areas when it comes to analytics. Another way that you can see where you are today is by going and taking the data analytics maturity model assessment. And this is free. You could just go on, answer some questions, doesn't take a long time, and then you can figure out exactly where you are in your maturity with data and analytics. And also what it does is give you some action items. So here over on the left-hand side, it can give you some action items on exactly what to do for next steps. So it'll tell you where you are, how you compare to everybody else, and then some real action items that you can take at your association to get to that next level. So how will you get there? So once you kind of take that assessment and see, okay, what people do we have in place? You might sit there and look at the size of your association and realize, okay, in order to really take this to the next level, we might need to change the way that we're thinking. We might not need to add staff, but we might need to put together an educational program to really educate our staff on how to use data and analytics to make decisions. And we actually have an example of some real results from an analytic strategy roadmap, so you can see some of those recommendations that might come in each one of those 4 focus areas. So you might be thinking now, how will you get there? So when you think about an analytic strategy versus KPIs or key performance indicators, These are both critical, and these are some of the items that fall underneath each one of those. So an analytic strategy, you're looking to navigate complexity to really start your current state and really understand how you're going to get to your future state, clarify value and understand the cost of the current situation, manage risk, and learn and apply best practices. When you're looking at key performance indicators, you're looking to align your analytics strategy with your association strategy and mission, measure what matters, monitor progress, and then continuously improve. So this is the actual process that you walk through for an analytic strategy roadmap. So you want to go through preparation, and then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into each one of these. So if it was something that you wanted to take back to your association and implement, you'll have some key components of each one of these to get you started to producing an actual deliverable or an actual roadmap. So you want to start with preparation, go through stakeholder discovery, analysis and synthesis, vision and business case, and then finalizing your roadmap so you can present the results and plan next steps. So when you think about preparation or preparing for an analytic strategy roadmap, these are the things that you want to consider. So choosing a core team. This can be done in many different ways, but typically you want a cross-functional team. You want to think about the size of that team, probably 5 or 6 people across some key areas of your association. Then you want to review your strategic priorities as an association. Identify key success factors at the organization and departmental levels. Again, thinking about any sort of analytics, you want to make sure it rolls down to the lowest level of granularity, all the way up to a couple of KPIs that really drive the health of your association. And so this is going to help you map out what those are. Identifying your key data sources. So your AMS, usually being a primary key data source, along with any others that you might have, including spreadsheets that you're using, really identifying and taking an inventory of all of those data sources is something you want to do in this first step of preparation. Reviewing key reports by business area. So figure out what are the key reports that everybody's looking at today, and not only that, what are they using them for? Because we've often found that people are producing reports that they're not even using, or they're not using correctly. And so going through and not only identifying what these reports are, but really identifying how they're being used and the why behind why they're being produced, and then establishing a communication plan. So who's going to be involved in the analytic strategy roadmap, and not only that, who's going to be involved in the implementation. So when you think about data and data as an asset, it's really something that's owned by the entire association and that everybody should be leveraging. And so therefore your communication plan should really include everybody, and how you communicate to those different levels of the association and those different departments could vary. And so that's why you need a communications plan to be put together. So then after you go through putting together those key steps of preparation, you want to move into your stakeholder discovery. And so you put together a strategy kickoff. You want to think about who the core people that you want to be in that kickoff, introduce the process of what's going to happen, review the features and the benefits. Everything that you do, you want to kind of look at the benefits of analytics and build enthusiasm. Like anything else, it's a change management process. So as much as you can get buy-in and build enthusiasm, the better off that you are and the more successful you're going to be. Then you go through and you do your stakeholder interviews. So these are group discussions with key business areas. And here you're trying to inventory all the data sources. So you might be sitting down with membership, or if you're just doing this with your business area, you're sitting down with the key players within membership to learn what those data sources are, how they're using that data or how you're using that data, and then what are the key opportunities for improvement. Usually just by sitting down and having these interviews and discussions, you will discover a lot of inefficiencies that are taking place, perhaps a lot of things that are happening that are redundant or manual that could be automated. So even if you just get through the preparation phase and the stakeholder interviews, that's really a lot of headway that you would be making for your association. So you want to go through and you want to do this with each one of the key business areas. And then, of course, executive leadership, really sitting down and clarifying the business drivers and the success factors from the perspective of the senior leadership team, because you want to make sure there's not a gap between the executive leadership team and then the departmental leadership team. So then you get on to step 3. So step 3 is your analysis and synthesis. And here's kind of the workflow that you go through, starting with the association mission and strategy, working through current state, desired future state, the gap analysis, then the recommendations. So based off of that gap analysis, you want to prioritize and put together a timeline of recommendations. So again, putting together some quick wins will help you really gain traction to continue to implement your analytics strategy. And so that should be taken into account during the recommendations process. Step 4, you get to your vision and business case. So here you have your findings and recommendations, and you really want to start to validate what those are. You want to refine your analytics vision, review and validate business priorities and risks, and then also make sure you're revisiting this. So this isn't an academic exercise. This isn't something that's done and that sits on a shelf somewhere. This is something that's meant to be a working document to align your association and really kick off your analytics strategy. Finally, building your roadmap. So the roadmap development, this is when you're looking at your final revisions of your roadmap to key stakeholders. Again, this doesn't have to be a long document. This might just be a 5-page summary of your findings and a timeline behind those findings, and then an action plan. Those things are much more important than putting together a lengthy document. So you can certainly do this at your association on your own by following those 5 steps. So this is an example of some recommendations that might come from an analytics strategy and roadmap. And so if you think about those 4 key focus areas that you saw before, this kind of ties everything together. So people, you may discover that you need to hire this client. Certainly this was, some of the recommendations that came for them. They needed to hire a dedicated analyst, promote data literacy, and again, really put together that education plan and focus on adoption. So their end game was putting together some of the things that you saw earlier around data visualization and wanted to serve SelfService BI. So they wanted everybody in the association to be able to go into a tool and get answers to the questions that they needed in real time. And these were the other pieces that they needed to put together. So process, performance management, and data governance. So they really discovered that they had really no data governance at all. And so putting together the committee, a lightweight data governance policy, and then some of those other artifacts like the data inventory and the data dictionary. Technology, they wanted to, a recommendation was a central repository and self-service analytics. So again, their goal being they really wanted to be a data-driven or a data-informed association, and they wanted to make all of their decisions based on data. They were kind of tired of making decisions because that's how it was done last year, or very fragmented in different silos within the association. They wanted to get everybody on the same page and be able to make real-time decisions based on data. And these were the recommendations to get them there. So building that central repository and self-service analytics so they can go in and be able to slice and dice and get answers to the questions that they needed. And then around data, a data strategy for each one of these strategic objectives. And then, of course, security and privacy. So these were the action items that resulted from everything that you saw here in the recommendations. We turned those into some action items. So launching a data governance initiative, And these were all kind of quick wins and things that they were able to take up to the executive leadership team that they were going to start to implement right away. So develop and implement performance measurement. So again, aligning all the key performance indicators of the association that really drove the health of the association all the way down to individuals and their performance metrics and how they tied up to it. Then building the central repository for trusted, consistent data. So really that one source of truth that they were looking for. So building that central repository with an action item, and then focusing on data literacy and adoption and working towards self-service analytics. So we put together a rollout and communications plan to allow them to work towards the education and communication of allowing people to go in and do self-service analytics. And I actually just spoke with this client last week, and I'm happy to report they now have over 50 people going in every day to their self-service analytics tool and using it to drive decisions. So, you know, the communication, the education, and everything that they did as a result from an analytics strategy roadmap, they're really meeting their goals and exceeding their goals, which is really exciting to hear about. So I'm going to touch on KPIs just for a couple of minutes because it's really important and often missed when you're thinking about analytics strategy and roadmap. People are thinking, okay, well, what do we want to measure? And then I'll show you some visualizations that might inspire some ideas on how you would want to measure things, how would you want to look at things, and really if you're looking to go towards self-service analytics, it might be something that you want to adopt or certainly inspire some ideas off of. So very basic, what are KPIs? A performance indicator is something that can be counted and compared. And so when you're thinking about that, some considerations that you always want to ask yourself, can it be counted in the form of a number, percentage, or currency? Can it be compared to what's optimal? So you never want to have just a floating number out there. You always want to compare it to something. So you're comparing it to budget, you're comparing it to last year, you're comparing it month over month or to a trend. Another consideration is the evidence observed in the same way by all stakeholders. And this could go back to having a data dictionary and really making sure everybody is defining things the same way. Is it contributing to a significant organizational objective? So you really want to limit the number of KPIs that you have and making sure they're directly aligned with your organizational objectives. And then is it being measured over a specific period of time? So think about how you're using it and why you would want it month over month or quarter over quarter or year over year. So a KPI design process looks something like this. You're creating objectives, you're describing the results, identifying the measures and some of the considerations we just talked about, defining the thresholds, then uploading the structure, figuring out what data you need to support that, and then interpreting the results, and of course, taking action. So that really walks you through an analytics strategy roadmap and how you really do that, starting with the preparation and preparing, putting together the core team, all the way through the final roadmap and recommendations, and then even an example of what those recommendations might be. So the other thing that I wanted to show you was kind of a case study of visualizing your KPIs and getting to the self-service BI that everybody's really looking to get to. So again, starting with strategic goals, going down into objectives, initiatives, KPIs, and then visualization. So going from something like this might be something that people are looking at day to day, different variations of spreadsheets or tabular reports, and really going to something like this. And so this could be something that you might consider for membership. This is a membership overview. So you certainly want to be able to look at a high level. So over on the left-hand side, KPIs, again, always against a goal. So these are, you know, the health of every association. They're typically looking at current members. And then not only that, the current members up against a goal. And then is it good or is it bad? So simply using green and red to let you know, yes, we're on the right track, or no, this is something that we probably need to dig into and figure out what's going on. So retention rate, new members year to date, and dues collected. So you have a combination here of percentages, counts, and dollars. Some other ways you might want to look at it is actually by diving down into membership type. So this is collectively all of your members and all of your current members, but maybe you just want to look at associate members, or maybe you just want to look at student members. So you should be able to click to quickly slice and dice to get to those numbers. So if you were to click on associate member, all your numbers would update for those. And let's just say that you realize that you have declining membership in your associate membership. Membership churn is something that's often overlooked, but this is a great way to figure out if you have maybe a retention problem, or maybe you have an acquisition problem. And you can see that down on the bottom right through membership churn. So you can see a breakdown of members that were reinstated, members that rejoined, members that dropped, new members. And so you can really slice and dice to figure out exactly where are your challenges and where should you focus your time to improve. So you might realize through slicing and dicing through something like this that you have maybe a decline in member retention with your student membership. So then you can really focus a campaign on keeping those members. So another way that you might look at a different department might be an events overview, and this might be a way that you look at it. So again, looking on the left-hand side, looking at some KPIs, you really want to consider what's driving your events revenue. So again, you have some counts and you have some dollars. So registration count this year compared to last year, registration revenue numbers, registrations by weeks out, registrations by type is often very important. And then you're looking at this on the bottom left here, and you're looking at this year by year. And again, thinking about you always want to build everything down to the lowest level of granularity. So if I wanted to, I could drill down even to an actual individual registration. And at the top, having some slicers, you can look at different meetings. Here we just have a sample of 2, but you might have 200. And so you might want to look at all of regional meetings, or you want to look at just your annual meeting and really start to see the trends that are happening with your annual meeting. One step beyond this too, with predictive analytics, you might want to consider who's likely to attend. That's a commonly looked at propensity model for associations. They always want to know who's likely to renew in membership and who's likely to attend an event. This could also help you look at events, cities that you want to have your events, travel distance, geography, demographics. And so the possibilities when you're thinking about putting together your analytics and how it can really drive your association to make better decisions is endless. This is just an example of a sales overview or non-dues revenue. So you might want to look at all of your non-dues revenue, abstract, publications, sponsorships, trainings, and look at the sales by product by year, see what's profitable and what's not profitable, what you might need to sunset, where you want to focus some of your areas or your resources, like I talked about earlier. And then looking at your sales by month, is it trending up, trending down? Where are we really making our money? Where are we not? And why is that? Does that align with our overall association strategy? And should we focus some more time there? And so we might notice that a certain area is trending down, and we really don't want it to, because that aligns with our strategy that we need to improve in that area or drive that area. So then we put together marketing campaigns, and then you can really start to see, are my marketing campaigns working? So a product breakdown, when I talk about putting together different campaigns, you have different channels that you may do that in. So what channels are working and what channels aren't? That way, again, you can focus your resources on the areas that are working and take them away from the ones that aren't. and be able to pivot quickly, because sometimes that's just as important. And that's what this is showing here. So campaign summary. This is an example of event registration. So where are they coming from? And that way you know what channels are working and what channels are not working. So here you see emails obviously working. So whatever campaigns that we've recently sent out in marketing, we could see the email strategy is working really well and it's driving a lot of registrants. I touched on unstructured data earlier, and these are some great examples of how you can use unstructured data in visualizations and data analytics. So here we actually have from ASAE's Collaborate. That's their community. So they're bringing together all of the actual data that's in their community so they can see what search terms are highly sought after. So you can start to see what's really important to your members, what's trending up, what topics are trending up, what topics are trending down. Now, what might you do with this? So you might see that a certain member type or subset of your membership is really focused on a certain topic. So hey, let's have a webinar about that topic. That's something kind of why we're all here today, right? John said everybody wanted to hear about analytics strategy and roadmap. So why not listen to our members and really start to think in real time? Maybe we can put some things on our website. Maybe we have an event coming up and we can really drive some of that content based off of what our members are talking about right now. And that's going to really allow us to not only stay relevant, but be relevant and top of mind with all of our members. So another way that you can do that is through abstracts and abstract submissions. You can slice and dice that way. You might want to look at what your first year members are talking about, because oftentimes it's less costly to keep a member than to have a new member acquisition. And so really focusing on that engagement and what people are talking about and using unstructured data to do that. These are some great examples of how you might be able to do that. Then the last thing, again, this is looking at predictive analytics and thinking about when you're thinking about member profiles and who's likely to renew, you might have something like this, where over on the left-hand side, that bucket of people, or those probably two deciles or buckets of people, are absolutely going to renew. So why focus on them? The people on the right-hand side are never going to renew. So again, why are we going to focus our resources on those individuals? And you really want to focus on the middle people and how you can drive them to the left to be the folks that are going to renew. So this is just an example of what a model actually looks like. So I'll end it with culture. All of this can be achieved, but one of the driving factors behind any sort of analytics strategy that you're putting together is a data culture. So everyone should view themselves as a data owner. It's not something that lives over in IT and that IT cares about. If you think about it, we're all using data day to day in our jobs to make decisions. And so therefore, we're all data owners. We should all think about making decisions based on that data. Data quality should be built into group and individual incentives. Also, data quality, people often think it's a barrier to get started in the analytics journey. It's not. It actually helps drive some of that transparency so you can figure out where to start and how to prioritize in getting your data into better shape. And you don't always need fancy tools. Think about some things that you already have. You want to get some quick wins. You want to get some buy-in. Starting with Excel, put together some visualizations to really get the buy-in from everybody and show the value of the cost of this current situation even, or what the realm of the possible is. So some of the visualizations I showed you today and the dashboards I showed you hopefully got you excited. And that's what happens typically. People see that and they think, wow, we can really get to this state. We can really get to SelfService BI. Okay, how do we get there? And then you can really have that conversation and get the buy-in from everybody to really participate in the process of going through the roadmap and getting you started on your analytics journey. An additional resource that we have that's a free resource out there is the Ultimate Guide to Data Governance for Associations. So if you're thinking about data governance and how you want to implement something at your association, feel free to download this and allow it to guide you to do that. We also are happy to share the different components of the analytic strategy roadmap if it's something that you're thinking about implementing it at your association. I'm happy to share that as well. And again, the analytics maturity model, go on, see where you are, see what those next steps are for your association. And these are all free resources that are out there for you. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. So I hope everybody is excited as I am about analytics and your analytics journey, and was really able to get some takeaways on how you might be able to achieve some of that and inspire some ideas that you can take back and really implement at your association. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions or anything you're thinking about, or anything that maybe popped up in your head as I was walking through everything? Okay, so we do have a question. It's, can you pull
unstructured data from Facebook or Twitter?
Yes, absolutely. So that's one of the key areas when you're thinking about unstructured data or behavioral data is through social media or web analytics. So whether you're using Google Analytics, that could be a great resource, or just the back end of your website and really looking at what people are doing, what they're clicking on, what they're downloading, and then of course looking at Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and really what people are, again, are saying and doing. I focus on the community a lot of times because that's a place where you can actually tie it back to an individual. A lot of times when you're looking at web analytics and social media analytics, you're looking at a lot of aggregate data, but it still can give you great insight into what your membership's talking about. So that's a really good point and should absolutely be a part of that 360 view of your members. Any other questions?
Julie, how are email analytics and data integrated?
So typically, when we're talking about email, we're talking about email marketing analytics typically, and that's coming directly from whatever platform you're using. So if you're using Informs or Real Magnet or whatever that source system may be, connecting directly with that source system and pulling in all of that data is the best route to take. Okay.
Hey, Julie, do you have any tips for encouraging staff to use the AMS for data collection and sharing?
So that's a great question. So the AMS certainly holds a lot of information, and you're going to continually use that for reporting for your operational and your transactional items. But when you're thinking about analysis and looking at trends, you really want to consider an analytical tool and pulling together kind of a central repository of data so you can see that in a way like I was showing you before, when you're looking at trends over time and items like that. And so it's two different purposes, really. And so when you're thinking about operations and transactional, you want to make sure you're capturing all of that data in your AMS. So when you're thinking about analysis and multiple data sources, you want to consider a central repository that's built for analytics and analysis, not for transactions and storage. Anything else?
Julie, what is the biggest difference that an association with a small staff would need to do compared to the examples that were given that were more focused on a large staff?
Sure. You know, really that comes down to the people component. You should absolutely, as a small staff association, still go through those steps of putting together a data inventory, aligning your analytics with your strategy and mission, and coming up with what those KPIs are. But it might be 2 people in a room doing that, and then really looking at, depending on how small staff, I mean, I've worked with associations that had, you know, 5 people. And so those all 5 people were involved in that process. And then it was figuring out, okay, what are some lightweight tools that we can leverage to get us to that same level? They still needed self-service analytics. They still wanted to make decisions based on data. So none of those goals changed. I think just the actual process to put that together changes a little bit. It becomes a little bit more lightweight, that's all. So you might have a couple people in a room as opposed to a working group of, you know, 6 to 8 people. It might be 2 to 3 people. But the end goal of putting together all of your data in one place and putting together visualizations so people can access that information to make day-to-day decisions is still the same. And I'm happy to walk through whoever that is. I have my email up on the screen now. Please feel free to email me directly, and I'm happy to have a deeper conversation in what some of those recommendations would be for the small staff associations as well. Any other ones? Okay, great. And that goes for anybody. My email's up here. If you did have a question and you didn't want to, you know, ask it in a public forum, feel free. Or if I didn't dive deep enough into an area you wanted to hear about, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm happy to talk about it more. I know John as well is on, and so if anybody had any particular questions for John, or certainly he's available to answer any sort of questions as well. Okay, we're all good? Okay, so with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope everybody was able to take away a nugget or two of information to go back and really start some sort of analytics journey at your association. And I appreciate you all taking the time to be here, and have a great afternoon.